very much. Good afternoon, ministers. And my first question, I'll ask the Minister of Finance, because I remember asking him this question earlier, and I got an answer, but now I'm getting some new information. I'd like some clarity. Minister Gibson, the St. Martin Carnival Development Foundation, I asked before if they had submitted their financial statements in order to be able to get the government subsidy. Information reaching me that St. Martin Carnival Development Foundation, while there is approved money for them, have not yet submitted their financial statement. And the information I'm getting, that government is requesting their audited report from 2007 to 2016 before the monies that is allocated for Carnival is released. Do you have any type of information on this, and what is government policy with regards to subsidies that is given to foundation?
Thank you very much. Yes, you did ask me the question before, and I did give you the answer before. That question has to be directed to the appropriate ministry involved, and that ministry is the Ministry of TIAT. So that question should be laid at her feet at this time, not mine. What I can tell you is that the budget for Carnival subsidy has been approved, and it's now a matter of following the process as described to have the funds released, which they have not yet been released. I'm sure it's in the process. The subsidy ordinance requires that any amounts that's given out by government over 25,000 guilders, that you have to procure an audited financial statement of the expenses that you made on the basis of that subsidy. Personally, just to add to the question is, I think that is somewhat of a hardship for certain foundations, and that I'm looking into the possibility of raising that limit, because some of these foundations have to pay sometimes between $6,000 and $12,000 US to obtain an audited financial statement. And I think that kind of money could be put to better use by turning that money back to the foundation so they can do their work that they're doing for the community. So I'm thinking of an amendment to that ordinance that would raise that amount to 200,000 guilders, and to get the finance department more actively involved for all amounts that's below that 200,000 guilders. We're talking here about 30 to 50 foundations. So when you multiply the expenses that they have to incur by producing audited financial statements for each of those 30, 50 foundations, you're talking sometime about 3 million guilders that we're feeding accountants with, while that 3 million could be going to alleviating a lot of misery and suffering of the people that these foundations are serving. So that is just insight as to what I personally think ought to happen in the future with these foundations. But as far as Carnival is concerned, just want to confirm their donation has been confirmed, and it is the Department of TIAT that's charged with that, and I invite you to address that specific question to the Minister of TIAT.
Yo! Great Music Studios. I ain't going home till they play my song. I say I ain't going home till the last truck gone. I got my shoes, I got my rags, got some liquor in my bag, and I ready to get on. You looking for me, here I am, jamming long time behind my van, winding up on wifey bam bam and getting on bad, 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 bad. till they play my song. I say I ain't going home till the last truck gone.
Go over to the Minister of Romy. Minister Myers, I listened to your presentation with regards to parcel one, which is Phillipsburg, and the commercial, but you gave some indication to parcel 5 and 6. I believe one of the areas is Cahill. You spoke also about the transition period that government had anticipated. Now, based on the contracts that government gave to these new contractors, is it in the contract that government must provide the bins for these contractors, and did government do so in a timely manner?
Thank you for the question, Bibi. Indeed, it is indicated in the contract that government will provide bins. However, in the previous contract, bins was allocated at certain locations, and contractors had to indicate, because in certain areas, the former contractors removed those bins. On the part of the ministry, maybe that was a way they let the ball fall a little, that they didn't do a survey to see which areas bins was removed, yes or no. In certain areas, it was indicated. The contractor would call and said, in this area, there's no bin, and then the ministry would provide a bin for that area. But it was up to the contractor as well to indicate, listen, in the Cahill area, the bin was removed. Once the ministry was aware of that, a bin would be provided in those areas.
Follow-up.
Sure. Hold on one second. We seem to be establishing a precedent here that's going off track. 2 questions, and then
question?
you're having 2-part questions. You did it with Minister of Finance. Now you're asking 2 questions again with regard to Minister of Romy. You're now at 4 questions, because every time the breath that you're taking to ask your questions, you're doing it in 2 parts. I just want you to be aware of what you're doing. So right now you have 4 questions. So we can't have the follow-up at this point. We'll proceed, and if the follow-up session allows us in time, we'll take that, okay?
Okay, no problem.
Thank you very much. Andrew Dick, Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Yes, good afternoon to the ministers. Minister Jacobs, I contacted you concerning the uniform situation at the Leonard Connors School. No information was given. You said some information, you'll check it out. So is there any information where that is concerned now?
The uniform situation has been forwarded. I did not get the update, but it was forwarded to the head of Division Public Education. And as far as they are concerned, as from what I've heard, that there is no real issue. The uniform will be implemented as of August, so it's not an issue for today. And it's something that they went through a process with a committee, etc., and that the PTF or the PTA was involved as well. So that's the information I've received thus far.
Okay. Concerning the Bus Owners Association, we understand that you retracted the August plan for the new rules. Can you tell us why?
I believe last week we had several discussions, and we'd had meetings with I did explain that we've had meetings with the School Bus Owners Association, which was a first for the ministry as an organization. The inspection department had individual meetings with individual bus drivers. But shortly after, during that meeting as well as after, it was brought to the attention of the ministry and myself that there were also discussions going on between the School Bus Owners Association and the ministry TIAT, which for years this has been an issue between the two ministries in terms of who's executing, what are the roles each ministry has to play. And as the budget sits by Education, Culture, Youth, and Sports, and the responsibility for transportation of school children sits by us, we had indicated as a ministry over years, so I am speaking collectively for myself and past ministers, that it's a responsibility that we need to regulate. However, continuously it was such that whoever got routes, etc., was still regulated at TIAT. So the bills were ours, but the decision-making was not. And so it continued to burgeon out of control. Several meetings, and there was a committee established in the past as well, 2012 or 13, that was supposedly working together. However, that committee, I don't know, with changes in government, whether it was not priority at the time, it disintegrated or became less cohesive. So towards the end, August 2015, there was advice made up with the terms of reference approved, etc., since 2015 of last year, and the information was passed on to the Ministry of TIAT. So it is quite surprising to see that then negotiations continued in October of 2015 from TIAT side with the School Buses Association. So the School Bus Association is in their rights in terms of having discussions with government. It was not necessarily with the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sports. So we have retracted the tender to be able to cooperate and collaborate with the Ministry TIAT so that we will all be singing the same song from the same choir in the same pews. And in the interest of all concerned, so the school, we are meeting first, which will happen this week. Both ministries will be meeting to come to a consensus as to what exactly we're going to be doing moving forward, because it cannot be that the School Bus Association is hearing from two different entities within government. So that is the reason why it was retracted.
Thank
Our
you.
society is made up of morals and values. What do we mean by morals and values? Morals are also called principles. Morals are habits with respect to right or wrong conduct. Morality is ultimately a personal compass of right and wrong. Values are standards or ideals. Values are important and lasting beliefs shared by the members of a culture about what is good or bad and desirable or undesirable. Values have major influence on a person's behavior and attitude and serve as broad guidelines in all situations. One important result of morals and values is integrity. Without morals and values, there can be no integrity. The word integrity is much used in our society of late. That is understandable, because integrity is one of the main building blocks of a well-functioning democracy. Without integrity, corruption can take hold of a community. Corruption is defined by Transparency International as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. The gain can be either financial or non-financial. In a worst-case scenario, extreme corruption could lead to poverty and could be the cause of hardship. An impoverished community can quickly turn chaotic and unstable. This scenario should make it clear that the fight against corruption is necessary. More importantly, every one of us, as citizens, must take responsibility for this fight. We should all be concerned about the spread of corruption, which can be compared to a virus capable of crippling government, discrediting public institutions and private corporations, as well as having a devastating
hearing from
impact
two
on
different
human
entities
rights of
within government.
population.
So that is the reason why it was retracted.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Judy Fitzpatrick, Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Thank you and good afternoon. I just have two questions. I would just like to know if the minister can provide an update on what's the status of the vetting of the names of the persons being vetted for the top positions at utilities company GEBE.
Thank you. As I indicated some weeks ago, that the information was sent to the Corporate Governance Council for advice. In the meantime, they had requested some additional information, and that was sent, if I recall correctly, about 2 weeks ago. So anytime this week, I contacted them this morning, and they was finalizing the advice. They was looking, inquiring, getting some legal advice. And anytime this week, beginning of next week, I expect to receive the final advice.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, the finance minister, any word from CFT on the budget?
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your questions, Judy. Second round of questions begin. Keeping in mind our cutoff time this afternoon would be at 3 o'clock. Bibi Hadshaw, you have the floor.
Thank you, Cedric. As I indicated, I wanted to follow up with Minister Myers. Minister Myers, can you tell me if parcel 5 and 6 have the same contractors like was there past 5 years? And if it's a new contractor, if you can give me some explanation so I can digest correctly or understand correctly, how do you expect the new contractor to know that the bins that were there belong to the previous contractor and that they would have removed their bins maybe 2 days before the contract ended? How do you balance this out? Because you're saying that if things are not done in a timely fashion, that you intend to have subcontractors at the expense of the new contractor.
Those were some of the issues that was discussed. In the terms of reference, you had to indicate certain things, your equipment and so forth. Some of the new contractors were in negotiations with existing contractors in terms of buying over equipment and so forth. That's why I also indicated that in the transition period, a day or two, we expected some hiccups where that is concerned. Again, the contractor had, in my view, an obligation as well. If you see in the district where you are responsible for that one of the bins was removed, you contact the ministry right away. We would have provide one of the bins them with contractual, which is our obligation. We would have provided the bins. Somehow, I don't know, a miscommunication or whatever, but they didn't put no bins or put containers. I saw in certain areas where containers was put almost 8 feet high. Complaints came in where people couldn't throw the garbage in the container because it was too high. So those things was not according to the standards. But again, if the contractor, we had expected first 2 days, what hiccups with the communication there, bins would have been replaced and so forth. So in my view, after the 2 days, as it began to prolong, it became a concern. And that's why we initiated contact with the contractor and started to voice our concerns. Because again, I want to make it clear, in certain areas, if garbage is neglected 1 or 2 days and you fall behind, you will have problems catching back up and things. And that is the case in those 2 districts, parcel 5 and 6, where they fall behind and now they are requesting help from others to just come up to par. But we just want to make it clear to them that it is a serious issue. It is a health issue if it continues in this manner. And if they cannot do it, I will have a third party come in and do it on their expense. As simple as that.
Can you give us an update as to St. Peter's area and what, because when I spoke to you the last time, you told me that the government was going to, the ministry was going to look into the fact that the previous contractor stopped working at least 2 days before his contract ended. Where are we with that investigation, and what measures does your ministry plan to take against the previous contractor?
Well, right now the ministry is doing their assessment, and I will await a report from the Department of Infrastructure. And once they present their report to me and their findings, then we will draw our conclusions and take whatever measures is necessary.
Thank you so much, Minister Myers.
Thank you very much for your questions, Bibi. Before I take your questions, Judy, I'd like to acknowledge the presence, of course, of the Prime Minister, the Honorable William Marlin. He's also open for any questions that the media might have. Judy Fitzpatrick, you have the floor.
Thank you. First of all, my colleague had to leave because he has a 3 o'clock assignment, so I'll ask a question that he asked me to ask first, and then my questions.
So is the sum total of your questions?
He
Because he's entitled to 3 questions. So
Yes.
you can't do that. So you have your 3 questions.
Okay, Minister Myers, my colleague wanted to know, had government anticipated the transition period as it relates to garbage collection, and why wasn't an announcement made or some sort of measures put in place to mitigate the effects? Because, you know, we have a chaotic situation at the moment.
Well, again, we anticipated some kind of hiccup. It would have been a pipe dream to think that things would have been, the transition would have gone smooth. You calculate some kind of hiccups in between. One of the things we did before the new contract took effect, we consulted with the new contractors and basically asked the question, are you ready to go? All indicated that they was ready to go. They were ready to go. So if they had indicated, listen, I'm having some issues and things, government could have taken measures to mitigate or whatever problems and things, but that was not the case. So yeah, it resulted in what we have experienced in the last few days.
Thank you for that answer. My second question is for you as well, Minister Myers. You indicated earlier that the Corporate Governance Council had requested some additional information as it relates to the vetting for GEBE. What sort of additional information did they request?
Yeah, that information I cannot reveal to you right now. We are waiting the advice from them, and I can't indicate that right now.
Okay. Do you anticipate a positive response? And Minister Gibson, can you give us an update on the road tax payments?
No. I would love to, but I don't follow it on a day-to-day basis. I think last week I had mentioned that I had contacted the receiver of taxes, and there was about 1,000 plates that she felt she was behind, but she had no reason for panic. I should mention to you, too, that the last couple of days we've had some technical breakdowns there with our server. There was a fire, and the last 2 or 3 days, intermittently, the office was closed as a result of that defect in the software and server problems. But I'm happy to report that as we speak, everything is up and running again.
No, the department is still closed.
It's open now.
It's open now? I just
It was-
passed and it was closed.
Yeah, but just while I was walking to come into this
Okay.
press briefing, I got a call.
Okay.